Hello everybody, Edre here, and for anybody new here, I make casual reviews that are just my opinion, so take everything I say with a massive grain of salt. But today I'm going to be reviewing the new Slowthai album, Tyron. A bit of background like I do with all of my reviews, Slowthai is a British rapper who kind of became known for his anger and political commentary within his lyrics, and his album which came out, I believe, in 2019. His angered political commentary on the leadership of the United Kingdom, as well as carrying the fake head of Boris Johnson, definitely generated much attention, much controversy, also a lot of praise. His UK hip-hop sound has a bit of grime in there, but also a bit of punk attitudes. He's very a hard-to-pinpoint type artist, and I really don't think we have to pinpoint him. Needless to say, I have never been too obsessed with his music, nor have I really been too aware of everything he has done. However, I have gone back, listened to his first studio album, an album that I actually do appreciate. I wouldn't say I would rank it as high as many other artists or many other people seem to do, but I do think that it was a promising debut. So let's just get into the overall sound of this new album, Tyron. Musically, the album has a bit more of a trap-inspired instrumental palette, and that is a change up from the kind of different sounds that were experimented on the last album. Unfortunately, though, I do feel like it does take a little while into the track list for this album to really start picking up, in my opinion. Some of the singles are packed right in the front of this, and unfortunately, the single Cancelled might be one of my least favorite songs of his. It's, in one of my opinion, one of the most accessible tracks of his, but also one of the most least interesting, least compelling tracks. It's just my personal opinion. So that is a little bit disappointing in my opinion, I have to admit. But the further you get into this, likely things do start to pick up a little bit. You know, the highlights on here start to pick up on the song Vex, which is much more reminiscent of a track like Doorman from his debut album, which is a song that I actually do think is arguably his strongest single to date. It has a bit of a more industrial trap sound and a bit more of a punchy delivery, which is something I enjoy hearing from Slowthai. I feel like he's much better when he's much more aggressive. Later on, though, in the track list, the song I Tried has a bit more of an R&B type, sampled type beat that I thought came across much more interesting to my ears, much more pleasing to my ears. I think it has one of his better, more soothing deliveries that was executed quite well. Definitely one of my favorites on this track list. Later on, the track Terms, featuring Dominic Fike and Denzel Curry, I think is one of the most powerful tracks on here, with some of the best lyrical substance and lyrical commentary as well. Great powerful hook, and overall just a great instrumental. Overall, I would argue Terms is up there with being one of his best songs too. Definitely a highlight on this album. And while there is a lot of points on this album in which I find a lot of enjoyment, I think he's definitely moving in the right direction in many spots. I just feel like a lot of these tracks may have compelling lyrics and they're well written, but unfortunately, I just feel like a lot of them leave little to my imagination and just are not as compelling, not as interesting to my ears, especially compared to his last studio album. And unfortunately, I hate to use the word, but come across relatively a bit more forgettable. And I think there's just genuinely a good amount of filler throughout this album, and I find that disappointing. You know, I think a perfect example of a track like that is the song Push, which is a track that on paper I should enjoy a lot. I honestly do prefer when some of these rappers do bring a bit more indie, more guitar-based sounds into their music. But unfortunately on Push, it features Slowthai rapping over a much more indie rock guitar-based instrumental. And while I really enjoy the concept, I enjoy the instrumental, I just feel like his style of rapping, his delivery, just clashes in a very negative way with that. At the end of the day, it does leave me a bit conflicted because while I do enjoy many of the, ideas on this album, and there are many highlights like I Tried, Vex, Terms, all great tracks, in my opinion, some of his best. I do think that unfortunately there are many areas on here where I do think there was a little bit of filler. However, I do gotta say, some of the tracks, even the more filler-oriented ones, are still relatively strong and do not disgust me or leave me massively disappointed. I just wish they were a bit more thought out, a bit more well planned out, and unfortunately I just don't feel like they were. Overall, I think it's an alright follow-up to his previous album, which really made pretty massive shockwaves. However, I just think sonically it's not as interesting. The instrumental palette just seems a bit more basic than I was hoping for. And overall, like I said, the filler tracks do drag this down a little bit, but I can't take away from some of the highlights and the fact that lyrically he is very strong here. I think he does have some of the most conscious material out there, and definitely is one of the most interesting lyricists to listen to. But at the end of the day, I have to give this a review, or I have to give this a score, and I have settled on giving Tyron by Slowthai a grimy 6 out of 10. For anybody new here, you guys need to know anything above a 5 is good, anything below a 5 is negative. So a 6 is still positive. I did enjoy this. I just wish that it was a bit more unique. That's honestly my main complaint here. There was a lot of filler tracks that weren't too memorable. I thought that he's still on top of his game when it comes down to the lyricism, the concepts, and there are still some major highlights on here, don't get me wrong. I just feel like it could have been a bit more well fleshed out, a bit more unique sounding, and unfortunately I don't think it was. That being said, it was still enjoyable, and I have settled on giving Tyron by Slowthai a grimy 6 out of 10. Goodbye.